discuss the prosecutor's pay scale. So a portion of this is open meeting, and then we'll go into executive session to discuss specifics. But with that pay scale, let's start with Commissioner Korn. What's your thoughts on the recommended pay scale?
So we were basically, we changed it around, and we're starting the lower end at $90,000 a year, I believe is what we discussed, for a deputy prosecuting attorney. So is that, DP01. I was looking for the proper grade, like on all the other grades, and I wasn't seeing that. I was like, so that it'll start at DP01 and go down to DP04, it looks like. Trying to remember what we had discussed before and what we thought we discussed before. Two separate things.
So the way that, one of the things that this spreadsheet reflects is that we removed the level 1 to be in line with other counties. And so the base rate was increased on the deputy prosecuting attorney at $90,000. And so the question that we're answering now is the way that this pay scale goes is it's bumping each of the levels up, so that when he posts a position, it's the base is 90, the high is whatever the high on the 4 is, and then as he receives applications, his recommendation is that he identifies which level is he feeling based on the rate of pay and the experience that he receives in. So what the board is needing to address is the levels 3, 4, or 3, 2, 3, and 4, because those shifted, and so that we can know that those 3 levels are in line with having adjusted the bottom of the tier.
The grades themselves?
Correct.
Yes, I think it's all 4 now, because we had gone, there had been the 5 grades or tiers, if you would, and then based on how the office is, because we had talked about multiple options at the last meeting, and then I believe the conclusion we came to, which was presented here, is through HR, was the fact that your actual structure is 4 tiers or grades. The deputy prosecuting attorney, the lead deputy, the senior deputy, and the chief deputy. Bless you. And then there was a conversation about, was 10 steps too compressed? And so it ended up, the recommendation being the 12 steps, so it wasn't as compressed. So my understanding is that the current proposal that the prosecutor thought was the most effective with his current structure and what he's attempting to do going forward was, as Commissioner Williams was saying, and Commissioner Korn, starting at the 90 with the base, and then we'd have all 4 tiers or grades with the 12-step. That evaluation resulted in, if we looked at the staff within the office, the annual difference in total rate of pay, this is obviously not inclusive of the benefits side of things, but I calculated the annual difference would be approximately $64,397 from current to what's proposed with this new pay scale. And there was also the start of the discussion that we haven't concluded yet about the actual prosecutor's pay. And then part of that conversation was from a funding perspective to deal with that change in the rate of pay. There was the conversation about the contract with the city of Sandpoint, and that those dollars had been flowing into the general fund instead of into the prosecutor's budget, which seems more appropriate. There was the intent to cancel the logical contract, which was $30,000 a year, that was supporting the assistance with a high volume of public records requests that have since gone down. And so the prosecutor's office had indicated that they felt there was not a need to continue with that contract. And then there was the savings on Westlaw. So it looked like we were somewhere in the $140,000 range of funding in the prosecutor's budget that would be able to offset what's being proposed. And so I think from a pure budget perspective, it sounds like the financial capability is reasonably there. It's about how are we setting things up for success. We know that there's prosecutors that have been recently lost. We know that you're trying to hire some right now. And we have a statutory obligation to maintain this function at minimum levels. And so the proposal on the table, from my perspective, seems like we're hitting all those needs that we've discussed. Because if I recall, the Public Defender's Office is starting at $90,000 for their initial positions, plus the $10,000 sign-on bonus, which we voted on previously to add to help to really be more competitive with that. So I think the bottom end of our scale, we're showing that now we're looking to be competitive in our market with another government entity that is seeking to hire and recruit from the same pool of candidates that we are. And then we're looking again at trying to look across all four tiers in order to maintain that competitiveness and try to both attract and hopefully retain the staff that are remaining at this point in the office. Is that a fair summary of everything we've discussed today?
I think so. I think we equally should be addressing the prosecutor's salary. When you look at the grades that are here, it's in line with the competitiveness, but the prosecutor's salary, through some of this happens through politics where we don't change that. But when you look at grade DP04 and a grade 10 is 170, prosecutor's salary is far below that. And so it feels like you've got a minimum of looking at 146 with a maximum at least of 180 when you look at what this pay scale is, when you consider the elected prosecutor's role in the county. And the compression, when you look at the salaries of the some of the staff members, which are public record, so it allows me to mention just the salary and the name. You've got 77,000 is one, but when you look at your next lines, you've got an attorney making 128,419, 134,929, and the elected prosecutor is in the line with those two high-rated attorneys. And that's not saying whether or not they're worth that dollar amount. It's showing the lag behind on the prosecutor's salary, and that's part of what we need to address. So my thought is that we're looking between 146 and 180 for the elected prosecutor when you look at how we have to shift this. I did ask Louis what his thoughts were on his salary, and I believe that your recommendation, unfortunately, I'm going to be honest about your answer, was you were at the low end of what the salary, your thoughts of were from Bonner County. But in terms of your office, I believe you told me something like 146 or 147. Am I wrong on what your number was?
For the future,
Or your rate of pay?
what I am right now,
Yeah.
I thought it was 143.
Yeah.
No, I mean, but what you would expect to change to. I think that you messaged me 146 or 147, which still puts him as a lag behind in the,
So I
It would lag
looked,
far behind my colleagues, not the people under me, but
the other prosecutors in the state.
for similar counties.
Yeah.
yeah, so I did look at the other counties, the data that IAC published. And there are, what's Blaine? Sorry. There are 3 counties, I believe, who are smaller than ours in population that have prosecuting attorneys that are making above 144, 145, and 176. There are ones that are half the size or less than ours, and those are making in the 120 to 140 range, so very similar. And then we have the counties that are larger, the 2 closest in size, but they're still larger than ours. I know we've got at the 159. And Twin Falls is at 158. So as I was looking at those numbers and comparing those other counties, and then looking at what we were proposing with this revised pay scale with the 4 tiers or grades and the 12-step, my recommendation to the board would be if we looked at a 10% increase, that would take the prosecuting attorney as the elected from 143,338 to 157,672, which I think would make more sense when we compare to similar sized counties, prosecutors' rates of pay, and when we compare that to what the higher rates of pay are within the current prosecutor's office for our county.
I think that that's a reasonable number. I put my disclaimer on accepting that number is only that we will have to change the kind of the behavior of the county of not bumping up the prosecutor's office the way that they need to be bumped up, because it'll feel like a big jump. But at the same time, his salary will still come in lower than his grade 10 of his highest position. His salary will come in lower than his grade 3 as well at grade 10. And so we have to be mindful to make sure that we're shifting as we need to. But I think the 157 is a reasonable change, and I believe that he can absorb that change within his budget as well.
That's where I'm at. The only thing that I think we haven't addressed would be the on-call pay question that you brought up. And I honestly now don't remember what you had suggested, or if you were still working on that suggestion.
I suggested $400 a week
For
the attorney who's on call,
So the chief deputy,
all of them.
all of them? Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't be every week, it's just so you do your week of on-call, you submit to payroll, I did my week, you're reimbursed $400 for that week. That's my suggestion.
No, I saw the communication on that, and that's reasonable because it's 24 hours a day. And we also have to be mindful of, we need our people to be competitive enough for how much you suck out of personal life. And that's one of the hard spots on call. It's you're not able to move away from our area. You have to be available to have to come in if necessary, which means you're just working from home essentially, is what it comes down to. So
I've been doing it for 25 years, and I'm not going to lie to you, it is stressful at times. And probably the most stressful is that you get a call and the police officer that you're dealing with is on his shift, and he is talking at you like a mile a minute, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're supposed to be making a decision to do something or not in that split second. So,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I've been doing it for so long that it's not as hard because I'm used to it, but
it'll help with people
Yeah.
the compensation helps people get in that rotation and pay attention more. So is the board agreeable to the grades of DPE 01 through 4, the way in which it's outlined?
Yes.
I am.
I am, okay. And then with respect to the $400 per week for on-call, is the board agreeable to that?
So I have some more questions on that. So what are the duties of the attorney that's on call for that week? You just mentioned one of them.
right. So the typical things that happen when you're on call, well, there's a bunch of different things. So one of them is just offering advice to officers during the non-work hours. Moreover, it's a lot of search warrants. So for things that cannot wait until the next morning, like they need to serve a search warrant, that goes through my office. Cooney County does their own search warrants. We have never done that. I don't know of any other county that does just allow police officers to do their own search warrants. So I do feel that that is a function that we need to remain involved in. Mental holds is a huge issue. Protective holds. The way it's working now is we have to file paperwork in order to get someone transported. We're working on trying to stop that, but the way it is now, that happens probably a couple times a week. Now, and inevitably it happens during non-work hours.
There is an increase on that in Bonner County,
There is.
because that's part of what we're trying to work on, is to address that impact, especially on the off hours and mental health holds, because our position of treatment is there, and then we're still currently dealing with that one particular case over there that has a lot of legal assistance needs, which is unfortunate, but that.
So are these attorneys, are they salaried?
Yes,
They're salaried.
yes.
So I'm just trying to figure out where the $400 a week amount came from. Does it justify their hourly pay for the time that they're actually putting in? And
Well, it depends, no, it would not. And for the actual time that they put in, it would not, for sure, because it takes you, when you're woken up, unless it's like a big deal, like a homicide or something, and then that would be me that handles that. But if you're woken up, it's probably gonna be 2 to 3 hours that you're going to spend doing a search warrant, making sure it gets signed. You gotta wake up the judge, get all the paperwork to the judge, get it back, and then get it to the police officer. You're talking about 3 hours, basically.
On-call, what you're paying for is the, all of the constraints on somebody that you're putting on, not necessarily what they have to do, but the availability of use in the off hours doesn't allow them to, even the idea of, it's the weekend, I'm going to go to an area to go hiking or something. We're saying that that person cannot do those things, and so when I look at the on-call for the prosecutor's office, you're really saying they're working that full week, 24 hours a day, until you switch to somebody else doing that, because there's a lot that someone can't agree to do because they're too far away from civilization to get that kind of work done that's needed. Even if there's no call that week, which probably never happens, you're really paying because you're telling someone they don't get to have any time off this week. That's essentially what you're doing.
I understand that. I don't know if the public understands that or not. It may or may not happen.
Yes.
So you don't know. And I just want to make sure that we're being fair to other employees that are on call, that are going to sit there, they're watching this right now, or they're going to watch it tonight or whatever, saying, well, wait a minute, I don't get paid anything extra for being on call. So I want to make sure that what the board decides is fair to all the employees that have to be on call before we start fielding those messages. And I'd like to also know how many of your attorneys actually rotate through on that on-call service. I'm assuming it's not everyone.
Everyone except Bill.
It is everyone. Okay, so even your entry-level attorney knows how to do the search warrant paperwork and all that?
Yes, they, oftentimes they will call me or a senior attorney.
Why does Bill not rotate into it?
Because he's civil. We just never, the civil guys have never done on-call, because it's all related to criminal things.
You don't have civil where, pretty sure, where civil things happen on off-duty hours?
He just takes those calls.
Oh, he just takes them?
Right.
So he's, okay.
Yeah.
I was
presumably
gonna
you
say,
guys are not
well, in my
calling-
mind, it's the civil does, but you're saying he's just taking it. I got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I know you guys call at 7 in the morning, because you do me, whether I answered or not. But you don't.
Why'd you
call-
look at me when you said
You don't
that?
call at 1 in the morning,
Well,
which is good.
at $400 a week, we've got a new hour to call, so I can justify to the community. Okay. Now, salary paid for the prosecutor. Commissioner Korn, do you have an issue with what that recommendation is?
I do have a little bit. It's a very big jump, and it puts them right underneath the Kootenai County one, which all of our other departments and electeds are trying to catch up their employees, and they always reference Kootenai and Spokane County. And it just brings up another issue again for us is if we're, within 1%, it looks like, off the top of my head, of Kootenai County, then are we going to be addressing deputies and everybody else, bringing them up to that same pay scale too? That's my only issue, is the fairness to the other employees.
For me, this is different. It's not the same as a sheriff's deputy type of we want to compare. This is a professional license, and you're talking about an industry standard. And remember that prosecuting attorneys have to share and swap between, if something comes up in our county that we can't manage, he has to send it down there and back and forth. And so I don't see our prosecutor as the same comparison as the way in which Bonner County often says, well, this is what Kootenai County gets paid. This is more of an industry, and in particular, the other thing on the prosecutor's office that we have to compare is they have greater resources down there with more assistance on what they're doing in Kootenai County, which one can justify some changes or differences in rates of pay because of that. I think ours, all of our hearings, it's all prosecutor marshal is doing that. And I think that there are some differences between the two. When I look at his rate of pay and our DP 04, the grade 10, that is higher than what his rate is. And that's part of one of the things that we have to look at when we're talking about where does his salary sit. It's a jump, and I think the jump is a reflection of the boards not incrementally increasing rates of pay on elected officials, especially when you consider the prosecutor, because it's not just, prosecutor has to have, unlike a lot of them, I don't have to have any special license to be a commissioner, but you need an attorney willing to be a prosecutor, which is part of what a situation that Bonner County deals with.
So I know, take the sheriff's office, for instance. I know that the sheriff is not paid at the highest level versus some of his employees. In fact, I think the undersheriff makes more than the sheriff off the top of my head by a little bit. So in the highest, if it looks like from what I'm seeing with the new shift to the new grades and steps, that our highest paid attorney would be moving to $139,000 a year. Is that correct? Or is there something out there that I don't have?
The 143.
The highest paid will jump almost 10,000, I thought.
Commissioners, can I interrupt for a second? This was a blank meeting on the calendar. Do you want us here or not? Because we had no notice that there was going to be anything like this today. It was just blank. It was in case there was a budget over.
Right, and we're this is a continuation of the prosecutor's pay scale, which is already accounted for in the overall budget.
Okay, so we don't.
So you guys don't
Okay,
need
perfect.
to
I saw something
track
here.
this when it comes to what you're doing right now for the published budget.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did set aside, well, the difference on the pay scales, the $65,000 is what I calculated, plus 50,000 for sign-on or relocation bonuses. So I did add 115,000 to the budget to cover this. So as long as all of this is incorporated in that.
Yeah, between what you accounted for already and the benchmarking budget, everything should be
Perfect.
built within what you guys have already established.
And Ron, the situation with the sheriff, that is built a little differently, where the undersheriff is the one that runs the operations primarily. The prosecutor is a different setup.
You're saying he works.
I'm just saying it's a different setup.
And we're being recorded. It's a different structure over there, so that's often the difference on undersheriffs versus sheriff.
The other thing, just to be fair, not arguing, but with Kootenai, the elected prosecutor there is pretty new, Stan Mortensen. He doesn't, their chief deputy, who is more like the experience of me, Art Verheeren, he makes 10,000 more than the elected guy. So they're a little different, I would just say that. But I respect anything you guys want to do is great with me.
Anything further on prosecutors' rate of pay?
To Commissioner Corn's point, and I completely understand it, because these are always challenging conversations. And I think we do have to look organizationally at each office and department, as well as what the market is dealing with in those issues. But also, I agree that there's also the responsibility, accountability, just overall to the tax base and the taxpayers and how we're trying to balance everything. And to that end, I've certainly been in management positions where I've had staff whose salaries are greater than mine for different reasons. But that usually had more to do with different licensing and specialties versus folks that are all licensed and performing the same type of role. So Is there anyone in your office who has more years of experience than you do?
Mr. Rodriguez presently, although he's just leaving, has more years as an attorney, but not as many as I do as a prosecutor.
Did you have Commissioner Corn, did you have a different number you'd want to consider?
Not specifically. I'm just looking at, that's a pretty big jump, and what I would entertain would be doing something similar, but spreading it out over a couple of years and not just all at once. So instead of 157, 152, and then next year, we're looking at like 155 or, because I know I'm looking at the top pay scale here on the DP 04, step 10, $170,000, but we don't have anybody in that position. And I don't even know what that person would be at that position. A retired judge or something, I don't know. So on paper, I'm looking at it in reality and not just making sure that, it looks like there's a potential that somebody could make $170,000 a year, but it's not going to happen this year. And I doubt it won't happen for quite a few years, would be my guess. When your highest paid attorney is at a 140, 142, 143, was it?
It would, based on what we're proposing right now for the new pay scale, that would be just over 143.
143?
Yeah, it's the middle, that lower right box table. It would be the middle position, the DP 03, I think would be the highest paid.
Oh, on this sheet instead of that sheet.
I can't tell.
Too many
My
sheets,
glasses
huh?
don't work that well.
I understand the feeling of the jump, feels like a big jump. I also have to look historically in terms of how we move the prosecutor's pay. And when I think of that, the comment that's made, it just feels like the answer isn't whether or not that's the correct rate of pay. It's just let's not have to take all of the hit. And I think that's an example of not having done a good job of managing the prosecutor's salary every single year. And then we're trying to address that now. To me, money that, as an individual, if I'm owed money today and I don't get my money today, but I get it, I'm losing actually more money by the time I receive the money I'm owed. And so my position would be, if the right scale is the $157,300 for the prosecutor's rate of pay, that we make that right, because we've gone years of not adjusting that salary. And in part, we have to think of no different than, his role is different than all of the rest of the electeds that exist, because we need someone with the education. It's not the same as I can win on without that. And in part, my concern, even though he's sitting in front of me, is the rate of judges is going to change, which then says, well, why do this for the county when I can make even more? And you're just waiting for that opportunity. Bonner County has not had a challenger of the prosecutor's office. One of the things that is always that anchor is, what are they getting paid? And in terms of work-life balance and that commitment, I don't think it's fair to say you've continued being underpaid, so let's just give you your increase, because we will still be behind every year. Because if today you're recognizing it's 157,300 and next year you bump it up a little, you'll always be in arrears because you haven't addressed the actual financial impact. And as you do your step increases and cost of living adjustments for the 1 through 4 attorneys, he will just continue to lag behind in salary, which doesn't help the overall budget, which is one of the things that the board said we were not going to do, which is why we knocked back over $200,000 to address salary issues for the county as a whole. And to me, the prosecutor is no different than addressing that when you look at the bumps that have already occurred. So that's kind of my position on it.
So you mentioned that we should put them in the right scale, and I agree, but what is that?
So my idea is I accept the 157, I rounded, so I just 157,300 is what my recommendation is. And he'll stay is, if you do right by the prosecutor, not withhold that every year, all of the increases that exist throughout the year should help him maintain the ground versus having to cover up lost ground. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I thought you might have something
I think he
similar
added,
to benchmarking, that he needs, because of this and because of this, this is where he should be. But because
Yeah, I see
I
your
really
point.
don't want to make decisions on, I
So
think that
you
this is
want
where he
the-
should be at.
if you're asking me what's the reason to justify the salary rate, when
Right.
you look at the top 5 northern counties, the level, the workload, and what we're asking, his low range is in the 150s. That's the low range for it. It is right to not, you can't just say the person, you have to know the background, and his comment about Kootenai County's prosecutor is correct. And so if you were to look at the most senior, closest representation in Kootenai County, you're hitting more like, I want to say that one's like 163, 168. So he will still at 157, 300 lag behind Kootenai County. So that would address your concern of, are we really in line with Kootenai County? Well, no, he's still going to be far behind what is the most comparable to what he is as the prosecutor in terms of the years of experience. So that, when you look at all of their salaries in totality, you can see that. So in that case, the person that is below their prosecutor in Kootenai County is at the top end of our DP 04 grade 10. That's where their person is. They're at the end of that. And so I think that's an argument for the adjustment that you have with the prosecutor. But I also am going to argue that one of the ways to address this prosecutor pay, and this will be my shameless plug, is the Board of County Commissioners is in charge of legal cases. And we have to address outsourcing our legal cases to third-party attorneys, which isn't a comment on who does it or why it gets done. It's that it's leakage from the prosecutor's office. So when I have to write a check to a third-party attorney, that's money that we're not putting in the prosecutor for education, salaries, and training. And so part of an adjustment can be, and I'm going to bring it forward to the board, is the statute says that the prosecutor and the Board of Commissioners have to make that determination that that outside need is necessary. We're not doing that. So we have cases where it just automatically goes outside. And I can see the dollars are going out of the prosecutor's office. That's in part supplementing as if we have attorneys to take on those cases when we're not building up the prosecutor's office. So that's part of an area of leakage that I feel can be rectified by a board vote that can pull money back in to address the leakage that's happening from the prosecutor, and in addition to helping retain institutional knowledge regarding the legal cases that we're sending out of the county, which will help strengthen the prosecutor's office. I think that is a position change that supports also the increase of the prosecutor's caseload, which is what that would actually end up doing, is increasing your caseload, but pulling the funds in to help do that.
So that would be a great argument for obviously bringing up the pay scale for the attorneys and making it more incentivizing others to come here. By raising the prosecutor's salary isn't going to affect the fact that we're still going to have to outsource some of our legal issues because we don't have enough attorneys to do it ourselves.
But you don't let your prosecutor make less than your staff.
Well,
Well,
we just said that our highest paid staff is at 143 right now.
I don't agree with that as a blanket statement, because it depends, I think, on the years of experience and so forth. So
I'm only
I don't
talking
wanna-
about specifics to him, not in general. Specific to him, he is the most senior person here, and
as the
he-
most senior person, I agree. I don't want to say that blanketly, because there are circumstances where I
Oh,
think
no,
that
for
doesn't
sure.
apply. So if we look at the current proposed pay scale, where we've got the 4 grades or tiers, however we want to put it, and the 12 steps, Louis, how would you look at years of experience versus the 12-step? So when you look at the proposals right now for certain staff in this new scale, we have somebody, for example, that's a DP 04, and it looks like they are a step 5, you know how many years of experience that would be equivalent to?
I don't, I mean, when I look at it, I would say between 10 and 15. Someone's pretty experienced.
So when somebody's in the midpoint,
Of their career, yeah.
you're looking at
40s,
that.
early 40s,
up to 15 years of,
yeah,
okay. And how many years of experience do you currently have?
25.
25. So where in the 12-step scale would you see somebody who has that 24, 25 years of experience sitting typically?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Honestly, I'm one of the most experienced prosecutors in the state. There are some that have more experience than me. But
Did I hear you say and throw the figure out at the beginning of the meeting?
I threw out numbers, he didn't.
Did you have an opinion of where you would like to be placed?
I don't. It's your discretion.
You have to have an opinion.
I do.
Come
I
on.
do. Yeah, I do. Honestly, my job is to speak honestly.
Okay, so be honest. So you know that the judges are increasing their rate of pay. We've had
Yes.
that issue. So where should your salary be given what your years of experience and opportunity to
It
move
should
away
be
from
somewhere
Bonner
around
County?
there. I'll be honest with you, I didn't say this, Chief Judge Burdick said it, the prosecutors are more important than the judges. And that's just the fact. But that's not meaning that you're gonna get that salary up there,
Right.
because you're not. But that's okay, but if you want me to be honest, I'm being honest. People in my position don't leave to become magistrate judges. Sometimes they leave and become district judges. You'll see sometimes prosecutors from small counties who are younger, they'll become magistrates, but that would be seen as a step down from my position. So it is a concern, and it's a concern because I'm not gonna be here forever. And then whoever the next person is that you have in line, if it's too far behind what the judges are making, what's their choice gonna be? Deal with the politics and all the other fun stuff of this
How
job?
you like the
or
politics of your job?
Where are the judges at currently?
164 for magistrates, 173 for district judges.
173 and
And they just
change.
got big jumps.
Yeah.
Because they were low. They were in the 140s and 150s, and they got a big jump. Because the legislature and the governor recognized that we weren't getting the best judicial candidates for those jobs.
Bless you. So part of what I'm looking at is, if we looked at the grade force of the chief deputy prosecuting attorney, which would be the closest to the elected prosecutor, if we looked at a step 9, that is somebody with significant experience that still has 3 steps remaining in their career as they gain more experience. That salary is very similar to the number I came up with if we used a 10% factor. And I came up with that 10% looking at some of the other counties, trying to figure out. And there is and part of the challenge is that when I looked across the IAC survey for the state, some of those numbers I was mentioning, part of that challenge is the fact that there are some real outliers when you look at county size, which is surprising to me. I don't know if it's history that's driven it based on who they could find, but some of the counties that are smaller are paying really high, and a few of the larger counties are paying a little bit low. So it's a
It's
really,
the availability.
the market has driven some strange dichotomies of scale.
That's
Because
what-
I didn't find consistency with county size and complexity of the county with the pay rates all the time. So it was a,
So for the prosecutor, what you're seeing across the state is that the smaller places are actually ending up paying more because they have to attract you to their town. Whereas the bigger ones have more flexibility of people that are willing to take that position, which is in part a little bit of what Boundary County did to Bonner County. They raised their rates of pay for their attorneys, and it sucked people from Bonner County to that area, and then they offered other little perks that made it worth it. And so by numbers, they're smaller, but because of the statutory requirement, they had to put money into that bucket to attract the personnel.
And some of it you can see based on years of experience. So someone that might be similar would be Twin Falls. It looks like years of experience there is 28. So a few,
He's
similar,
over
but a
nine.
few years more than you, but
Yeah,
not many
he's-
more.
He's a good friend of mine. I can tell you that, I just was on the phone with him. He's asking for 13% across the board, including himself. It sounds like he may get it, so even, their commissioners are dealing with the same thing here.
Sure, and they're a larger county.
They are.
But they have even larger counties than them around them, which we understand. So they're dealing with competition, I'm sure.
Yes.
So that's, yeah. When you start to do the analysis, there's so much differential from different counties because of other factors, yeah. And then years of experience has driven some of the numbers you can see.
Eastern Idaho used to be really poorly paid, but they've come up in the last few years. But their housing costs have come up. They're nowhere near, obviously, what ours are, but we've seen a big increase over that, but they're still lower.
Gotcha.
I'm sure Pocatello, Bannock County's lower.
It looks like the Blaine County prosecutor is 23 years of experience, so similar, a few less in years, but they're a higher paying county.
Yeah, in Blaine you have, if our cost of living is horrible, theirs is extremely horrible.
But it was interesting that they didn't have their commissioner site updated for Bonner County. But
Yeah, I wasn't sure why our numbers weren't in there. That was,
volunteer. So do we have a number that we want to present as the prosecutor's salary?
I think we're just off a little bit. I'm looking at basically the DP 04 and grade with a step 8. I think you guys are kind of leaning towards a step 9. So
I can honestly argue this both ways because just the data is all over the place. So it is a little bit hard for me to, and so I would be agreeable to the step 8 with the understanding, I know we can't bind ourselves, but the intent to be that we're back at the table next year to continue to move this forward, like you were saying, to kind of maintain some pace with not falling behind again.
everybody needs to be,
I agree, and we've been really, I think, I hope people understand, thoughtful about staff and what we're trying to do right now.
Yep.
But we do also have to look and see where the electeds are at, and I think we have a more unique situation.
Can I ask Louis something real quick? When was the last time that you got a pay rate increase?
Other than just
Not
the-
COLAs.
Not COLAs? Oh, boy.
It's been, that's where I'm a little hesitant, because knowing that it hasn't changed, it's been over 5 years since his, if I remember, since his salary actually went up. So what he's received are just the cost of living adjustment. And that's a hard one for me to say, not to move in line with, to say to stop at the 8, which is 153, 404, 80. That puts him in line, that's only $10,000 more than his highest paid person under him. That's what we would be saying. And so you'll still be behind the next year, because when you do that dollar and that, when you do your step increase or your cost of living adjustment, he still lags. And so if you put the prosecutor into, and this is my argument, not about the dollar, but just where we are in terms of as a budget. If the prosecutor's salary was in step 9, in line with the one, and I'm not saying that, mine is 157,300, not the 623. Then he would maintain ground as you went year after year. You're just delaying maintaining the ground. And arguably, if you changed it now, then what it'll address is, we're not going to look at it again because we just looked at it. And therefore, the cost of living adjustment every year should address the problem, because we've identified where you should be, because there's not an argument at this table that he shouldn't be at the 157 area. It's just, do we want to make the jump now? I struggle with saying that to anybody, because what this board has communicated is we want to make that correct. And in order to make that correct, it's to put it at the right area. And then if he were to come back next year to say, well, Kootenai County just bumped up to 164. Well, we bumped you. We don't review benchmarking every single year. That's my view on it. But
I hear what you're saying.
I concede, unfortunately, I concede the argument on both sides, but the part of what I feel strongly on is the prosecutor's office needs to take control of litigation in Bonner County. Taxpayers see we are already paying for services that we can be utilizing at a greater rate than we are. And part of getting that team together is the rates of pay, the opportunity for growth, and that starts with the elected prosecutor's rate of pay.
No, I understand that perspective. I definitely hear what you're saying. Do you know approximately how many years of experience Cohout has? Cohout, how many years of experience?
I don't. She has quite a few as a lawyer, not as much as a criminal lawyer.
I was just curious because that's a current staff member who's at the midpoint right now. Levels or step 6, so I was just curious if we knew his experience.
And something else I'd like to say too is, I think going 5 years without looking at pay rate increases is absurd. It should be reviewed, in my opinion, every 2 years to see where the market's at and if there are any adjustments. Commissioner Williams, you say that every year might be too much, and I still think it wouldn't be that hard to review, though. Letting elected officials go for 5 years is way too long. It needs to be addressed
The
sooner than
benchmarking
that.
is every 3 years for best practices in HR is to look at those numbers, because you can have some wax and wane in a year. Because what happens is if you look at it before you're ready to, where you're needing to make a change, then what happens is someone says, well, it's worth more this year, so and that's what's happening in our county now. People go out on their own and they say, well, this job is getting paid more now, so I'm owed more. But then the argument is, well, we just changed you. You don't benchmark every single year. I think you're getting at the point of, we need to do it consistently on the schedule that's reasonable and appropriate for everybody, inclusive of elected officials. You just don't, there's a problem when you do it too much too often in HR, because things do change. I think that politics have gotten into the way of elected peoples and salaries in Idaho as a whole. We've seen boards of commissioners make decisions on assessors that have not gone right. I think that's a problem as a whole. What are your, between what, we all three have said something on the rate of pay, where are you guys at with I'll just say my number recommendation is, let me go back to my $157,300 for the prosecutor. That puts him in line with a 9, which is still room to grow, which my argument is that it'll address that we won't be playing catch up in the next budget cycle, but that we will be maintaining the ground that we gained by the change.
Yeah, I'm looking at having 3 steps above that remain. I'm comfortable with that, because to me that's three quarters of the way through what someone would consider to be a typical career span. And I think we're in reasonable alignment with that based on years of experience. So that's why I've been asking the questions I have about years of experience of different folks, because I'm trying to figure out that alignment within the 12-step system to try to be consistent, like we've talked about so many times in so many ways. And so in my mind, I can justify looking comparably at a DP 04, step 9, which would be really similar to the number you suggested, Commissioner Williams, of 157,300. So I'm agreeable to that, based on everything we've discussed at this point.
Commissioner Corn?
I'm still stuck at my step 8 area. It's not personal.
I'm not taking it personally.
Okay.
Your step 8, are you sure 8? Because I'm thinking you
Yes,
mean
it's,
7, because your step 8 is higher than the number I
No,
153,400
404.
is.
Step 8.
is,
I'm on the-
is
I'm
kind
on
of
the-
where I'm falling. It's
Are you on
10,000
the-
I'm on
above
a
your
different
highest
one,
Because there
sorry.
are two of them that turn
attorney.
originally, okay.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if I had my way, I would address it sooner, not every 5 years, to make sure that you stay in that alignment. Because I'm sure last time we talked, you said you were going to plan on being around there for 40 years. So in reality,
All right, so it looks like though we have,
So, I mean, at the end of the day, a little bit of this
yeah,
is the art of the deal in the sense of we don't have an exact calculation.
there isn't one.
So we're sitting between discussing numbers in the 153 and the 157 range. Would we agree to say 155, and then that's our starting point, and then we're going to keep going forward from there?
I can only justify, and the reason I'm sticking of the 157.3 is because it is the jump that is needed. 55 to me is just lowering it because there's a dissenting opinion on the 157 versus concretely, the argument that I'm giving is rooted in a rationale versus of his rate of pay, not just paying him, but what is the rate of pay that's reasonable? And at 157.3, that addresses the issue of keeping him in line, because what'll happen is next year you'll come around and his team will have jumped up again and he won't have moved as far, and so we'll still be in the same boat. Whereas if he was put in the correct position right now, then as we go through the next years, we don't address it again, but we would be going backwards by saying, we're going to address you're going to hear the comment of the compression of his office, we will knowingly be voting for if you drop it below 157.3 versus 157.3 means then the next year we don't have to revisit that dollar amount because he'll be in the correct movement going forward. 155 means I'm agreeing that I'm just going to add in more money next year, which means it's not going to be in line with our idea of dealing with the current issue that is making us have to make the change. So I'm going to hold at 157.3 for those reasons. And we're not even going to ask.
I understand your reason.
We're not even
I
gonna
understand
ask
your
him.
reason. I can't do the hard math to qualify that. I understand. I don't disagree with the general perspective, but I can't say which number exactly does or doesn't meet that criteria. So Commissioner Corner, would you be comfortable with the compromise value, or are you hard on
The 155?
would you be agreeable to the 155, or are you hard on looking at the value that's the step 8?
I would compromise. I could see 155.
And this is where I like to be fact and data driven too, right? But I can't give you an exact equation that justifies which of those numbers. So I'm trying to find what the compromise is for the board. So that's, to me, I feel like that's a reasonable number when we look at the overall pay scale. I think we still have the ability to maintain some differentiation between the elected and the staff members that we have right now when we look at experience and growth remaining within the scale. So
And
what
just
your
because we
numbers-
do benchmarking, or just because benchmarking is usually done at 3 years, and I'm not even going to use the word benchmarking, I'm just going to say that I think the board should revisit all elected pays every 2 years. I'm just going to put it out there. Not that it matters.
And so
It's a
you use
worthy
the word
discussion.
benchmarking to not use the word benchmarking about benchmarking. Just gonna point that out.
But I'm not talking about benchmarking.
All
Okay.
right, so the dollar amount that the two of you have given is 155,000 even?
Yes.
Okay, so we've got $155,000 for the prosecutors. Is that a rate that's going to change right now? It is within his capacity to change that rate now. And so I'm going to make an argument that says he has the flexibility in his budget now to do that. I can equally agree to 155 if I were to say he gets made whole if we address that now versus waiting until the next fiscal year as well. What's the board's thought on that? Because
I'm
that,
agreeable to doing that as part of the overall prosecutor's office pay scale adjustment that we're entertaining right now.
so for next fiscal year or now? I think you're saying
All
now.
of this now.
Okay,
Is
all right.
what my understanding of the discussion it was intended to be.
Okay, so we've got a clear view of where we're going. So prosecutor's rate's going to change. We've changed step, our DP 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it starts at $90,000. The max range is on your step, goes higher than that. You've already received the opportunity to do a $10,000 sign-on and or relocation bonus. So we're going to go into executive session to address your two applicants and some of the people on this, unless the board has more questions.
The only other thing we haven't come to a conclusion on was the discussion of the potential of on-call pay. I think we've discussed
Oh,
everything
for
else with the pay scale.
$400 per week for on-call.
So, and that's, because it's, Commissioner Corn appropriately, I believe, brought up, who else do we have in the county that's on call? And it'd be good just to think through. Obviously, again, the roles and responsibilities differ from every department and office, but I don't have awareness to who else in the county sits in an on-call position, so I'm not sure what that looks like for somebody.
Emergency management is on call. Coroners is on call. There's probably some deputies in the sheriff's office that are on call. Just off the top of my head.
Those are different definitions of on-call though in HR. So when you're on call, to be called into work is not the same as you are, there's a difference. And so we have to distinguish that because in the event of an emergency having to call in is different than what we're talking about in terms of a prosecutor giving that time. I lean towards 400 seems a little bit on the high, and I think it can drop down to 3 or 350 a week. I push myself more towards the 300 a week, but I can be argued differently. And the reason why I feel like the on-call needs to drop down just a little bit is only because some of the duties it is inherent, some of this is inherent in the vocation itself, that you're going to do that. And you have to be part of it. So it's not, to me, that it shouldn't be that big of a jump, but it should be recognized because, I compare it to healthcare, you're always on call in that field, and it's built into the cake a little bit. And so for me, the 400 is a little bit more on the high end. I would like to drop it down. My gut is 300. I could be argued to 350, but I'm not agreeable to the 400. That's kind of where I am for prosecutor on call. It's not, so that, what are your thoughts on the on call?
Throwing unpopular on the table. I'd like to actually not include this in the attorney's pay scale decision today because I have questions about how we define on-call between the different roles and responsibilities across the county. And until we clarify the differences, I'd rather not make a decision so we can make something that if we have apples and oranges, we can create the correct definitions and differentiation and figure out if and when there should be additional pay codes associated with that. So I don't feel like I have enough information before me today when considering other departments and offices in the county to clearly make that distinction. So I'd rather address that at a separate time as a separate issue.
You can ask legal.
We're going to pitch it to the county.
I just have too many questions about it right now to be comfortable making that decision.
And in a perfect world, in my opinion, we would have enough attorneys to where if I was up last night 3 hours working on a search warrant, that I would take 3 hours off on Friday or something, to where we didn't have to spend any extra money and still accomplish our jobs, right? Meaning
you're-
that if we had enough employees to do that.
So are you asking for a float FTE for the prosecutor's office to address on-call? Which, it's not a bad idea. It's not, but it's,
If we can get one.
okay. So we currently do nothing for the on-call people.
Correct.
And so I don't think that Commissioner Domke's request is unreasonable to wait since we're making that shift. So are you okay with that?
Oh,
And then
100%.
we'll schedule a meeting to address in greater detail after more information is gathered in the different realms.
It's just because when it comes to the overall pay scale question, we've been collecting data, right, doing research, having conversations for a while, and this has been a well-documented discussion, and I just don't have that level of information on this separate item. So.
Okay. Are we ready to go into executive session? Okay, so we'll end on, we are accepting the pay grade scale, the prosecutor's rate of pay at $155,000, and we are not making a decision on-call, and all of the items that we have approved will go into effect by the next pace, because we're in pay week this week, okay? All right, it's 2:05, and we'll entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Based on the information before us, I move to go into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061B personnel.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion from the board on this one? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes?
Commissioner Donkey?
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly?
Yes.